Breakdown of the first step of alcoholics: anonymous acceptance, obsession, and ungovernability. The introduction to our recovery program begins with this step, which addresses a number of issues, three of which are particularly important: acceptance, ungovernability, and obsession. Before delving into this wonderful step, we would like to mention that among our basic points for the recovery of the sick person, acceptance, which is related to this step, is in first place. The first symptom of the disease is denial. That is, at some point when we were told that we had problems with our drinking, consumption, or lifestyle, we denied it and always preferred to blame others, justifying ourselves and hiding behind the actions of others to point out that our behavior was not as bad as they thought. The statement for this step says, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. It should be clarified that admission and acceptance are synonymous. That is, there is no difference between one word and the other. This step speaks to us first and foremost about defeat, how painful it has been with regard to drinking, drugs, or neurosis, and the admission that we, as sick people, have twisted our minds to the point of obsession with consumption that only an act of providence can remove. This step is not only practiced in relation to drinking or drugs, but also in relation to any emotional aspect or dependency we may have, such as neurosis, smoking, gambling, etc. It is a principle that must be practiced every day so as not to repeat the mistake or fall back into the problem at hand. Alcohol, drugs, or neurosis have stripped us of the will to meet their demands. We have to accept that in the face of the king of alcohol and emotions, we simply cannot cope with our own strength or literary resources. We will have to accept that we have a problem, which we definitely cannot overcome alone. How often do many of us deceive ourselves by thinking, I'll quit drinking when I want to, I'll stop cheating on my partner when I want to, I'll stop yelling when I want to, I'll give up my addictions when I want to. But as time goes by, we make the same mistakes again. All our promises came to nothing because we fell back into the same behavior over and over again. However, we realize that this defeat, far from being humiliating, will be the foundation of what the step mentions about obtaining a useful and happy life. In other words, the sooner we accept our defeat, the sooner the new ideas provided by this blessed program will begin to infiltrate us, because if we don't do it this way, our sobriety, if achieved at all, will be brief or non-existent, and we will not find lasting happiness and strength until we admit our powerlessness over alcohol, drugs, neurosis, or whatever problem brought us to the recovery program in the first place. Since self-confidence has not brought us good results, even at the beginning, it is a danger to our sobriety. Since what we call confidence was actually a challenge not only with regard to drinking, but also to our own lives. We are victims of a subtle mental obsession with drinking, and before we knew it, we were already complying with its demands. Some of us, through unfortunate experiences, have had to live through the agony and hell of this disease to understand that admission was the only thing that would get us out of it. In the early years of Alcoholics Anonymous, only the most desperate cases stayed. However, over the years, many young people who did not have to lose their family, friends, job, or social status stayed. This phenomenon was due to the fact that the veterans began to raise their level of suffering, or in other words, they shared their history as drinkers, how their drinking caused them to lose everything, and how they had to hit rock bottom to realize that they really had a disease called alcoholism. Hence the importance of the work of the veterans, those who spend 24 hours a day with newcomers or those who are just arriving at a group. It is necessary to show them the disease up close so that they realize the importance of the fact that their lives are at risk, and not only their own lives, but also their social and emotional environment. This first step also extends a cordial invitation, and we could say a sarcastic invitation, to those who do not believe they have this disease. It commonly invites us to try drinking in a controlled manner, taking into account what AA has told us about the nature of alcoholism, since many who come to AA do not believe they have this type of disease and are in denial. We have had the best judge who brings the facts to light, which is His Majesty, alcohol. When we took the test, we had practical and immediate results. We realized that we could not control our drinking, that we were not and never will be social drinkers, and that we really need help from another alcoholic. The first step places great emphasis on hitting rock bottom, since a person who has not done so does not sincerely try to practice what the AA program is all about. Alcoholics are selfish by nature. They don't like to waste their time, money, or effort on other people or helping someone else. They are individuals who seek their own benefit, pleasure, and convenience in all their instincts: social, emotional, sexual, and material. Only an alcoholic who has hit this rock bottom of suffering can understand the concept of acceptance, as it is their only way out. At first, they will do so out of the need to believe it, even though deep down there are reservations about becoming a social alcoholic. Those of us who have practiced this step realize its liberating effect in terms of obsession, that our lives are truly unmanageable, that we always contradict everyone, even shielding ourselves behind the faults of others or the mistakes of people to justify our way of living and drinking. Acceptance, ungovernability, and obsession are what must be made clear in this step. Now we will talk about ungovernability. If there is one thing that we as sufferers have endured and suffered serious consequences for, it is this pattern of behavior which has haunted us throughout our lives. Unruly means a person who does not allow themselves to be governed, or, in other words, does not allow themselves to be directed or guided by someone else. The unruly person does what they think is right, is extremely arrogant, and does not listen to people who try to give them advice or guidance. They do not accept criticism from others, even when it is constructive or for their own benefit. The ungovernable person always believes they are right about everything and does things according to their own rationalism, even when they know that things are not right. That is why it is always said that militant members must allow themselves to be guided. Deep down, the unruly individual has been deeply damaged during childhood, adolescence, and youth, has been humiliated by society, and reaches a point where they promise themselves that no one will ever hurt them again. At that moment, they shut themselves away in a shell called fear, where they live, and only an act of providence will be able to remove that ungovernability in the individual. Unruliness is counteracted by obedience to the spiritual principles of AA, because if we do not do so, our payment will be to become ill again and die. Obsession, on the other hand, means an idea, image, or word that is fixed in the mind, and the individual finds themselves dominated by it. This is what happens to us with regard to drinking, as well as other types of obsession, from which we have suffered equally or worse. For example, obsession with money, obsession with a romantic partner, obsession with power and prestige, psychotropic drugs, obsession with stealing, and so on. We could make an endless list. Obsession is the first monster we alcoholics face, realizing that alcohol dominates us, our minds, and that our willpower is useless, let alone our intelligence, since we are hopeless cases for our families and even for medicine, because often people fail to understand this disease, that despite being in an extremely deplorable situation where we have already lost everything, we still want to continue drinking, taking drugs, and damaging ourselves to the point of madness and death. One way to counteract obsession is undoubtedly to attend AA meetings every day, where, over time and without us realizing it, God begins to work and removes our obsession with drink, substances, or people. Another way to counteract obsession is to work with another alcoholic or sick person. In other words, service within AA is essential to dispel obsession.